Hello, welcome to John's Author Diary for the weekend in June the 9th, 2019. I've had a busy week. I am back at the writing desk after the week's holiday, and I've been experimenting with a new schedule for my work. So instead of just focusing on one project at a time, I'm now splitting my workload. I'm going to see how that is. I'm going to track it. But what I'm doing is I'm working on one project in the morning, and this is a project that needs editing. And then I'm doing first draft stuff or outlining, that kind of thing, in the afternoon. So I think what's going to happen with this is it's going to make my projects maybe take a little longer in the short term, but I think in the long term this will balance out. So this week during the mornings I was working on redrafting Ravenglass Book 9, so this is the Hermit. I feel like I'm just getting back into the series after taking a bit of a break from it. I've also been working on Wasteland Book 4, which is Cleric of the Wasteland, so I basically outlined up to the midpoint because I thought, I'll figure out the ending later on. So I've now reached the midpoint of the story, and so what I've done now is I've outlined the second part of the book. So this has been on the back burner for over a year now, and I know that I've been saying that I'm going to do it, and so I'm hoping that with this new way of working I'll be able to continue working on Ravenglass books and also get to an end of a first draft of Cleric of the Wasteland. Now I'm planning to relaunch my Wasteland series later this year, and so here and there I've been working on doing a complete overhaul of the writing. So taking it from being written in present tense to past tense, which is actually a lot of work. And I've also learnt so much about writing scenes, about story structure since doing those books that I've really been able to tighten up the stories, getting rid of scenes that slowed the pace down or weren't adding anything to the stories. There's also a bit of a weird thing I've got where between books 2 and 3 in the current series, I essentially left a year gap. Now there's part of me thinking that I may write another book that goes between books 2 and 3 when I do the relaunch, so that book 3 will actually be book 4, if that makes sense. So I did an outline a while ago for a book 3, and I think it might have been for a novella, I can't remember now, but I think it was for a novella that was set between the two things. Now I can expand on that outline and essentially have a novel if I want one. So I suppose I need to think about that in terms of this relaunch strategy, because obviously I'll need to order a new cover and I'll need to get my designer to adjust some of the other covers in order to allow this book to be in the series. And so I have been adding to Night of the Wasteland as well. So I did the overhaul of Wizard of the Wasteland. I'm now about a quarter of the way through Night of the Wasteland. So I'm just going to keep plodding away at that. And as well as that, I've also been outlining some extra stuff for the Black Death series. So this has actually been really challenging and probably quite time consuming just because of having to take up the slack when we lost the collaborator. So over the trilogy we're basically having to add a novel's worth of material. So it's a bit more of a mess than I'd like, but it is what it is. But I think it's still a project that we need to get finished, get out there. I'm also thinking that when I finish this Wasteland series, I'm going to go back and work on Blind Reset. So it's been a year since I abandoned this book. I thought it was rubbish. I hated it. I think it was probably the pressure of writing a book while it was on pre-order. So I put on a 3-month pre-order and started writing. I will never do that again. That was a bad idea. But I was curious the other day and I thought, was it as bad as I thought? And I have reread my scenes. I've got about 16,000 words written, which is basically almost halfway through one of the arcs in the story. So this is a story that's split between a real world and game world. So this is halfway up the real world stuff. Now, I remember writing Blind Gambit, and that was really hard work just because it does deal with disability and blindness, and that's something that I have to cope with on a day-to-day basis. And I know that these scenes are hard work. So I think with this new way of working, if I can do a couple of scenes a week and just keep chipping away at it, this will be another book. Because I've read the outline. The outline's fine. The outline is actually quite good. I think the story's there. I think it's really tight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think I just wasn't in the best place and probably, as I say, felt that pressure when I abandoned it. So who knows? It's not a priority, but I am going to revisit it. But keep it probably just as a duology, because writing a standalone is actually really hard to market. So I can do a re-release of the first book, release the second book. It'd be quite good if I can do that maybe by the end of the year. We'll see. I think my predictions of how long things are going to take are a bit off, so we shall see. And as for the non-fiction, I've put that on the back burner. Finish your first novels with the editor, and podcasting for authors. I'm going to work on that over the summer. It's not a priority. Fiction's a priority, but if I can have little moments here and there where I'm getting the editing finished, then that'll be good. I've started reading The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks. So this is one of those epic fantasy classics in the genre that I've not read. And we're doing this as part of the Arcane Book Club on Facebook. So this is a book club that I run for epic and military fantasy. And we do a monthly read, so this month it is The Sword of Shannara. I've been on a bit of a ancient Egypt rabbit hole this week. So I've been watching quite a few documentaries and listening to books and things about that. Now, I've been watching one on Netflix called The Pyramid Code, and first episode was great. You know, all the stuff about the pyramids being aligned to the constellations and Orion and being aligned to things like the solstices and things like that is absolutely fascinating. There's just so much in there that is just absolutely absorbing. And then the second episode, it went down the pseudo-science, pseudo-archaeological, mystical nonsense route, and it was talking about subtle energies and magic, and it's like this subject is fascinating enough as it is without having to add these layers of really out there speculation. You know, we can prove that these things align to the precession of the stars and things like that, and so it doesn't need this extra woo. They were talking about pyramid chambers having these orbs in them. I used to do photography many years ago, so what they call orbs are basically when you are in a dusty place, an old place, the flash reflects dust back to the camera, and because the flash is reflecting off a dust thing, they look like light orbs. And so basing magical theories on these things that for some reason can only be picked up by cameras but end up being an invisible light field, it's ridiculous. So that was a bit disappointing the way that went. First episode, great. No, the rest of it is just nonsense. So I mentioned last week that I was going to the Morecambe Steampunk Festival. Now, this wasn't as good as it was last year. Last year they had the roads blocked. There was a lot more going on. This seemed like a much smaller version of the festival. Now, I know that the organiser has had real health problems, so I'm sure it's to do with that. But we went out last week and had a good time, drank some beers and checked out some cool cosplay. There was a steampunk scorpion that was pretty cool. So hopefully it'll still be there next year because it is a lot of fun. So I've had no questions this week, but if you do have a question, please email me. It's john@johncronshaw.com. I'm also on the Patreon. I post these diaries a day early. I have articles. I have exclusive short stories and other audio. So please do check that out. It's patreon.com/johncronshaw author. So until next time, cheerio.